Hi, come on in. Thank you for dropping by. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing some more miracles with you. So let's get started. I've got a story that I want to share with you. It's one of my favorite stories. It's got several miracles in it, and it just shows you what God can do. It's a it's a story about employment and how he provides not only the job, but also protection for you on the job from people who would like to do you harm. I call this You Will Start on Tuesday. I think the year was about 1985. I was a contractor, and yeah, I think the year was 1985. I was a contractor. And I had been out of work for 2 months. Now, as a contractor, I expected to be out of work from time to time, and I saved money for it. But you never knew when the job would start, and you may not have enough money to last you. So it was always a time of apprehension. Well, I had been out for 2 months, and I had told a friend of mine who I respected because he was a very fine Christian and a prayer warrior. I told him about my situation, and he called me up one day and he said, Ray, I've been praying about your situation. And the Lord told me that he is having difficulty getting people into position so that you can have the job. But he told me that you will hear about the job on a Friday and you'll know it's the job for you that he wants you to have because it will start on a Tuesday. I said, nobody ever starts jobs on Tuesday. Okay. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Well, I didn't wait. I didn't have to wait for a couple Fridays to go by. It was that particular Friday the phone rang, and it was a an employment service company. They employ contract people like myself, and the person told me that they had a job. It was the only job available right now, but I could have it. It's in Germantown, Maryland. Well, I said, Germantown, that's 50 miles from here. And they apologized. They said it's the only job available and it'll start on Tuesday. I said, I'll take it. I was glad to get it. Well, I appeared on Tuesday. I went there and they had not quite gotten everything arranged for me because what had happened, they had a call from one of their engineering staff that he would be out for a couple of months on medical leave. Um, so they had to get his work done, and that's what they brought me in for. But they didn't have an office for me. And the manager of engineering introduced himself and explained the situation and told me we really don't have an office for you right now. We weren't planning on this. I said, it's no problem. Any area that you've got is fine. He's the only place I've got is right here in the hallway next to my office. And there was a little alcove in there. I said, that's perfect. I'll take that. Well, he was happy and I was happy. Well, I didn't have a desk. All I had was a big drawing board. So I took my Bible out and I put that on the drawing board, on the top corner of the drawing board. Um, Kind of like bait, you know. So I always considered myself as an ambassador for Christ. And when I went to companies to work, um, I would subtly let people know that I was a Christian. I wouldn't preach to them or talk to them about God or anything. I just put out the bait, and if they were interested, they would take the bait. Well, I started working and things went along, and I enjoyed it. It was a good job. It was interesting. And I was designing electronic boxes, which is something that I had had a lot of experience doing. And I had to work with a couple of draftsmen in the drafting department, which was just about 10 feet away, but they had an area in there for the draftsmen. And there was a drafting manager who oversaw their work. Um, it was arranged that I would give my layouts to the draftsmen, and they would take the information from the layouts and make drawings. And someone in the drafting department would check the drawings, and things would be made. Well, as it turns out, two of the draftsmen took a dislike to me. I think it might have been because of the Bible. But they took a dislike to me and they had a lot of comments about my drawings, which they took to the drafting room supervisor. And I had to sit down with them and I explained very politely that um, I would be providing them with layouts and they will provide the drafting room supervisor with drawings, and the drawings would be checked and the parts would be made, and I will not tolerate changes. Well, that was that. So things went along. The engineering manager was very happy with my work, so I wasn't concerned with them. Um, Time went on, and a young man in the drafting room, his name was Mike, saw my Bible and he asked me about the Bible and asked me some questions. And I told him, we can talk at lunchtime if you want. And so for the next couple of months, we talked every day at lunchtime about the Bible and about God. And it wasn't long, and he joined the Christian community. I was very pleased with that. Um, about that time, the engineer that I had replaced came back to work. And the engineering manager introduced us and told him that I had been given the job that he was going to do and that I would continue on that job. So the engineer, his name was Roy, he went to his office and spent the next couple days looking at email that he had not seen for a while. And he let the engineering manager he wasn't happy know that he wasn't happy with me. So things went along. The engineering manager told him, Ray's doing a good job. Just let him do what he's doing, and I'll get you something else. So that took care of Roy. The two draftsmen in the drafting room were still giving me a hard time, but that wasn't too big a bother for me. There was another man down the hall who was a Satanist, and he zeroed in on the new Christian that I was teaching at lunchtime, and he gave him a Bible. One of his Bibles, it was a Satanist Bible, and the young man, Mike, didn't know what to do about it. And so he came and asked me, he said, what should I do with this Satanist Bible? I don't think I should read it. And I said, no, don't read it. Best thing to do is burn it. He's, oh, I can't do that. He gave me this Bible, and he'll probably want to know what happened to it. And I said, well, you can give it to me. I'll take care of it. So he gave it to me, and I did take care of it. I brought it home and set it on fire and put it in that wood stove right there. Well, I made an enemy, which didn't bother me too much. And when the Satanist found out what I had done, uh, he intimated that he was going to make me sorry. And I think that meant that he was going to put some curses on me. And I told this young Christian, I said, that doesn't worry me in the least. The curse causeless will not take. That's from the Old Testament. And I told him that Satan and demons don't scare me too much because I've got somebody bigger than they are, and his name is Jesus. So the Satanist left Mike alone. And things started getting pretty touchy for me at work. The two draftsmen were giving me a hard time, and the engineer Roy was giving me a hard time, and this Satanist was coming around from time to time and making threats. So I came home one night. It was a Thursday night, and I was up to here, with all of the trouble. And I told my wife about it at lunch, and we waited until the children were asleep. And then we came in right in here into this living room, and there was a chair sitting right there. And I put my head in that chair and I started praying. And Judy sat in another chair and she started praying. And I forgot to bring my Bible. But anyway, there's a verse in Isaiah 41, verse 11. It says, all they that come against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. And if they continue against thee, they shall perish. I read that out of the Bible and I read it to the Lord. The Bible says that the Lord likes to be put in remembrance of his word. Well, I was making him remember. And then I told him, I said, Lord, I don't want these guys to die or anything like that. That's not the kind of parish I have in mind. But, if you could just get rid of them, it would make my life so much easier. So the next morning I went to work and I was at my drafting board out in the hallway there. And one of the draftsmen came in and he went over to his drafting table and he picked out his briefcase and he started filling it with all his stuff. And he said, I've had this place. I'm finished with it. Today is my last day. And he shut his case and walked out. I thought, whoa, that's something. And then the other draftsman came in and they asked where he was, and they were told. A little later, the drafting room supervisor came out of his office and he pointed his finger across the room. I forget the guy's name. Let's call him Larry. He said, Larry, today's your last day. Pack up and get out. And Larry was kind of shocked, but he said, okay, what else could he say? The drafting room supervisor told him, you can pack up right now and leave. You'll be paid for the rest of the day. So he was gone. 2 down. Whoa. Wow. 2 down. Well, Roy, the engineer, comes to work, goes in his office, puts his stuff down, and he goes over, he walks past me and he goes over and he knocks on the door to the engineering manager and goes in. And I couldn't hear all that was going on, but I heard the engineering manager raise his voice. And he said, you leave Sauls alone. He's doing a good job. Go into your office, close the door, and don't bother him or me. I thought, whoa, wow. And so Roy went by and he was fuming. And I don't blame him. I would have been fuming too. He felt threatened. And I didn't see any more from him, hear any more from him, or see him very much for the rest of my duration there, which was a few more months. And later on that afternoon, the Satanist was sitting at his desk down the hall, and his boss walked in and he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but the contract that you're working on has been canceled. Today's your last day. You can leave now and you'll be paid for the rest of the day. 4 down. Isaiah 41:11 said, all they that come against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. And if they continue to come against thee, they will perish. That's what the Lord said. That's what he said to Isaiah. Isaiah wrote it down. So the new Christian came out. His eyes were as big as quarters. And he said, have you seen what's going on? I said, yes, I have. He says, what's going on? I said, the Lord has answered my prayer. And I gave him a quick lesson on praying. I'll just give you a very quick lesson on praying. When you have something to pray about and there's somebody coming against you, if you can find scripture that's on your side, and there's a lot of it in Psalms and Isaiah and Jeremiah, pull out a couple scriptures and read them to the Lord in prayer and believe that he is going to do the things that he said he would do. And he will do them. He really will. I had another opportunity to pray this prayer against 2 engineers. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I'm going to wrap up my story about you'll get a job on Tuesday. I worked there for a couple of months more. They were so happy with the work that I had done that when I left, they waited about a year and they called me back and they hired me again. And I was there for 2 years, 2 years or 3 years, 3 years. I was there for 3 years. They hired me direct. In other words, I was working for the company. And they hired me not only to do the design work, but to pay me what I said I wanted. They had to pay me as an engineer and not as a designer. So now let me get into telling this other story, which will be very brief. About 15 years later, I was working at another company and I was working on the design of satellites, and I really loved it. It was the best job I've ever had, and that is another miracle story I'll tell sometime. Um, there were two engineers that I was working with, and they just thought they were the best thing to ever happen to an engineering company. They were so full of themselves, and they would get together and they would feed on one another and kind of bolster each other up. And they got they caused a lot of trouble within the company. Um, they angered some designers who just got up and walked out, quit. And they angered some engineers who just got up and quit. But these two guys had been, well, it was one guys, it was a man and a woman. These two engineers thought that they were all that. She had a master's degree from MIT. And let me tell you, she made everybody aware of that. And they started giving me a hard time. And I went home and told God on them. I read Isaiah 41, verse 11 again. And it was a few days later, it didn't happen the next day, it was a few days later, they were called into their boss's office. They were made aware of a lot of complaints that HR had sent to the boss, that there were a number of people leaving and naming them as the reason. So, without warning, they were taken out of their jobs, transferred to a completely different division and building, and that was the end of them as far as I was concerned. They never came back to give me or any of the other engineers a hard time. So when you're at work, and there are people at work who will single you out and give you a hard time. They might be ugly in the way they talk to you. They might make sexual passes at you. They might try to make you feel lower than a snail. Just say nothing. Go home and tell God on them. And read Isaiah 41 verses, well, read verse 10. I don't have that memorized, but read verse 10 and then pray verse 11. Um, I think you'll be pleased at what happens.